First thing we're going to make with SVG code is a hello world file. If you're not familiar with hello world, let me explain just a little bit about it. So a hello world file or a hello world program is typically the very first thing that you make when you're doing any sort of coding, whether that be programming with actual programming languages like JavaScript or Python, or even if you're using like markup for like HTML. Basically, you're doing it to make sure that you understand how the language works and how to actually call the program or get the program or the file to run. So let's do that with SVG. There's more than one way that we can do this actually, and so I'll show you two different methods. So we can either make just a straight SVG file, or we can embed it inside of an HTML file. I'm going to show you the second one first. If you're on a mobile device and you're planning on using that website I showed you, that won't work for the HTML file because that was SVG code editor only, and it won't work with the HTML aspects of it. If you're on a mobile device and you don't have Notepad or TextEdit, just open up a browser and go to repl.it, and here you can go to HTML and you can write the same code here. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and you would start with that. So on the Mac, I'm going to launch TextEdit. If you're on a PC, use Notepad. We're going to use a couple things called tags to define the different elements in our file. Because this is an HTML file first, we're going to go ahead and open with an HTML tag. And then the SVG tag is found in the main body of a page. So we're going to type body and then SVG. So we've opened three different elements using tags. Now we need to close them. So /SVG and a body tag with a slash in it and an HTML with a slash in it. To do our hello world text, we need to make a text element. So we'll do that by making an opening text tag, and we can close that using the same pattern. And I'll just type hey world. And now I can save this. And I'll save it as hello world. And I'm going to call it a .html because I'm doing this inside of an HTML file. I'm just going to put it on my desktop so it's easier to find. I already have one from the previous video. Let's put SVG on there. There it is. Now if I right click and tell it to open with Safari, well, you might think it didn't work, but actually it did. Do you see that little bit right there? That is the, if I zoom in, that is the descender on the Y in hey world. And that little bit there is actually the bottom of the E going just a little bit below the baseline. Those two little points are from the bottom of the W. There's the E, there's the D, and that's the, I think I put a period at the end. Did I? No, I didn't. I guess that's just the other part of the D. So you've got the bowl or the counter of the D, and that's where that line comes down. So how do we fix this? So the thing is, when you have it render stuff in an SVG, whether a shape or text or whatever, if you don't tell it where to render it, it's going to render it at 0, 0. 0 on the X plane, 0 on the Y plane. When it comes to text, it puts the baseline of the text, that's the very bottom, that like an imaginary line that the text sits on. Or if you're writing on physical notebook paper, that's like what you're sitting all the letters on, the baseline. And it puts that at 0, 0. So everything is right above it unless you've got a descender or parts of letters that just maybe peek over a little bit. So how do we fix that? If we go back into our code, we can tell it that Y is going to be basically any number. Let's do 15. And if we save it and we refresh, there we go. So it's a little bit further down. Let's maybe try 35. Perfect. We have a Hey World SVG file. Now the other way of doing this is to make an SVG file, just SVG, not inside of an HTML page. Now the reason why I didn't do this to start with is there's a few extra bits of code that we have to tell it to do to render properly. So I'm just going to reopen text edit, and we have a blank file here. We'll start with an SVG opening tag, and we close with an SVG closing tag. But we need to put some stuff in here. When we added the Y on that text element, that was called an attribute. If we're doing just a straight SVG file, we need some attributes inside of here to tell it how to render it. So we're going to set the version number, which we're going to use 1.1. And we're going to tell it base profile equals full. Now something to note, SVG code is case sensitive, so if I make something capital in a video, you need to make it capital too, or it might not work. Depending on what you're rendering it in, like which browser, it might try to run it anyway, it might partially work, or it might actually completely work, but it won't always. And then we need to set the XML in S, and that's HTTP www.w3.org/2000/SVG. And then it should work. XML, by the way, stands for Extensible Markup Language, and NS stands for namespace. So that's what that abbreviation means. It's not just gibberish, or it's not gibberish at all. So now we're going to make an opening tag for our text element. Oh, let's go ahead and put our Y attribute in there already since we know it'll be an issue. So 35 worked, we'll do that again. I'll do Hey World again, and we'll close the text element. Now let's see if it worked. So I'm gonna do hello world.svg on my desktop. And here it is. And if I open with Safari once again, there you go. You can see it worked. So that's a Hey World file using SVG, whether you want to embed it or not. Of course, that's not really what we were trying to make with SVG probably, but we'll get into some of the other stuff later. So that's it for this video. In the next one, we'll talk about actually how to render some shapes so we can actually draw some stuff with them.